Order. Order in the Grand Chamber. Supreme Councillor Vex Tara's voice boomed through the crystalline dome of the Galactic Federation's High Council. Their bioluminescent appendages flashed with irritation as they attempted to calm the cacophony of translated arguments filling the ancient chamber. Another mundane day of listening to insignificant concerns, I thought to myself, adjusting my sensory membranes to filter out the more enthusiastic frequencies of my fellow council members. As Ambassador Kral Thor of the Zeth-Kari Empire, I had endured countless sessions of this political theater. But today was different. Esteemed colleagues, I began, my translator perfectly modulating my subsonic speech patterns into something the lesser species could comprehend. I must bring to your attention a matter of increasing concern. I paused, allowing my words to ripple through the chamber. The humans. A wave of dismissive gestures swept through the assembled delegates. Some even had the audacity to engage their entertainment feeds. Ah, such typical arrogance. Yes, Supreme Councillor Vex Tara waved one of their primary appendages lazily, the bipedal primitives from that unremarkable spiral arm. What about them? Have they finally managed to achieve stable quantum communication? Or are they still using those charming little radio waves? The chamber erupted in what various species considered laughter. I noticed the Hrix-Shi delegate's thorax actually split from amusement. How? Uncivilized. Your Eminence. I continued, my bioluminescent patterns shifting to convey subtle warning signals that, naturally, most of these creatures were too primitive to perceive. While you joke, the humans have submitted their 47th petition for investigation into the raids on their outer colonies. 47th, the councillor's appendages twitched in what might have been amusement. My, they are persistent, aren't they? Like those small furry creatures they keep as companions. What do they call them? Puppies. More laughter. More dismissal. Exactly as it had been for the past 30 cycles. Perhaps I suggested, my patterns now pulsing with urgency, we should consider that this persistence might indicate. Ambassador Kral Thor. Vex Tara interrupted, their bioluminescence shifting to that particularly annoying shade of superiority. Let me remind you that we are the Galactic Federation. We have achieved technological mastery that these, humans, can barely comprehend. Their most advanced ships still use primitive fusion drives, for void's sake. What could they possibly do that would concern us? I gazed around the chamber, taking in the smug expressions of 12,000 years of uncontested technological superiority. The PX Lari delegate was actually playing a virtual game during my presentation. The sheer arrogance made my third heart clench. Very well, I conceded, my patterns dimming in resignation. Let the record show that I, Ambassador Kral Thor, formally voiced concern regarding our continued dismissal of human grievances. I settled back into my hover seat, adding under my breath, and may the void have mercy on us all when they finally lose their patience. The council had already moved on to discussing the latest developments in quantum crystalline entertainment networks. No one noticed my warning patterns. No one ever did. If only they knew what I had seen in those human eyes during our last diplomatic exchange. If only they understood that behind those deceptively primitive fusion drives and radio waves lay something far more dangerous than mere technology, a species that had mastered the art of waiting. The humans, as it turned out, weren't just waiting. They were counting their dead. Another colony attacked. Admiral Sarah Chen's hologram flickered before the Federation Emergency Council, her expression unnervingly calm. New Mars. Population 50,000. Casualties 15,427. Supreme Councillor Vex Tara didn't even bother to fully materialize their consciousness into the chamber. Their quantum avatar flickered with barely concealed boredom. And you believe, what exactly caused this tragic accident? I watched Chen's face. Was I the only one who noticed that micro-expression? That tiny flicker of something? Accident. Chen's voice remained steady. Too steady. Interesting choice of words, Counselor. Especially considering the plasma burn patterns match known Federation military signatures. My dear Admiral Vex Tara's avatar actually yawned, a gesture they had clearly practiced to mock the humans. Do you know how many species use plasma-based weapons? Besides, our sensors show no record of any military activity in your... Ah yes, your sensors, Chen smiled. Actually smiled. The same sensors that can't detect our primitive fusion drives. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. The Hikshi delegate's thorax started that annoying clicking again. Nobody liked being reminded of that particular embarrassment, how human ships somehow managed to appear and disappear from our supposedly infallible detection systems. Admiral General Zax Prime interjected, his crystalline form vibrating with barely contained superiority. Perhaps if you upgraded to proper quantum propulsion, like the rest of the civilized galaxy. Thank you for your suggestion. General Chen cut him off, causing several gasps. Nobody interrupted Zax Prime, but we're quite comfortable with our technology. Now, about those plasma burns. Yes, Vex Tara waved dismissively. We'll add it to the investigation queue. Right behind thee. What was it? Ambassador Krell Thor. The 47th petition I supplied, my patterns shifting to warning red. Nobody noticed. Again. You know what's fascinating? Chen's voice took on an almost conversational tone. In Earth's history, there was this thing called the Manhattan Project. Ever heard of it? The council members blinked in confusion at this apparent non sequitur. I, however, felt my third heart skip a beat. No. Well, it's quite the story. See, some people thought they had absolute technological superiority, right up until they didn't. Chen's hologram started to fade. Just something to think about while you're adding us to your queue. Was that a threat? General Zax Prime's crystalline form pulsed with indignation. From a species that hasn't even mastered quantum entanglement. The human admiral's hologram was almost gone now. Not at all, General. Just a history lesson. Her smile returned, sharp as a thermal blade. Oh, and you might want to update your sensors. You missed something rather important about 10 years ago. The hologram vanished, leaving the council in confused silence. Preposterous, Vex Tara declared. 10 years? Their fusion drives can barely reach their own colony worlds. What could they possibly have done that we wouldn't have noticed? I watched the space where Chen's hologram had been, remembering something from my studies of human history. Something about a planet called Pearl Harbor and the danger of waking sleeping giants. In the background, General Zax Prime was already launching into a tirade about human audacity. The PX Larry delegate had resumed their virtual game. Supreme Counselor Vex Tara was scheduling yet another entertainment gala. Nobody noticed when my patterns shifted from warning red to terror white. Nobody noticed that humanity had just stopped counting and started calculating. 3 standard cycles after Admiral Chen's history lesson, the warnings became impossible to ignore. Well, impossible for anyone actually paying attention, which, naturally, excluded most of the Federation Council. And so the human diplomat, Jack Torres, concluded his presentation before the Council. We have conclusive evidence linking the attacks to Federation-registered vessels. We demand immediate. Such accusations. Supreme Counselor Vex Tara's avatar shimmered with artificial outrage. And based on what? Sensor readings from your outdated technology? The same technology that can't even detect quantum signatures. I watched Torres carefully. Unlike Chen, his face betrayed no emotion. None at all. It was unsettling. Interesting that you mentioned quantum signatures, Torres said, his voice carrying the same dangerous pleasantness that Chen's had. We've been meaning to discuss those, particularly the ones we've been tracking for the past 8 months. The chamber went silent. Even the PX Larry delegate looked up from their game. That's impossible. General Zax Prime's crystalline form vibrated so violently I feared he might shatter. Your technology can't possibly. Oh, but that's the wonderful thing about being underestimated. General Torres smiled. Actually smiled. These humans and their smiles were beginning to haunt my sleep cycles. Nobody notices when you make a breakthrough. Speaking of which. He pressed something on his archaic-looking datapad. Suddenly, the chamber's quantum secure displays flickered. Just for a microsecond. Just long enough. What? What did you do? Vex Tara's avatar actually stabilized, fully a sure sign of genuine concern. We just wanted to demonstrate something, Torres said, still smiling. Every quantum encrypted communication in this chamber for the past 10 minutes has been logged and copied to our servers. Don't worry, we won't share the contents. Especially not those rather interesting messages you've been sending about the primitive species containment protocols. Supreme Counselor. Vex Tara's avatar turned a shade of panic purple I'd never seen before. This is outrageous, General Zax Prime thundered. Guards, arrest this. Your guards can't hear you, Torres interrupted, checking his datapad casually. We've isolated this chamber's communication systems. Don't worry, we'll restore them when we're done. We're not barbarians, after all. I watched in fascinated horror as the mighty Federation Council, masters of 12,000 years of technological supremacy, collectively realized they were trapped in their own chamber by a primitive species. Now then, Torres continued, as if he were discussing the weather about those attacks on our colonies. We've prepared a detailed report on the Federation military vessels involved, their commanders, and their mission parameters. We've taken the liberty of broadcasting this information to every species in the Federation. You know, for transparency. You can't. Vex Tara's avatar was practically strobing now. Oh, we very much can. And have Torres stood, straightening his simple uniform. You see, while you were all busy laughing at our fusion drives and radio waves, we were learning, adapting, preparing. Did you really think we'd spend 300 years in space without developing any new technology? We just didn't feel the need to show it off. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Those quantum signatures we mentioned tracking, you might want to check on your 7th fleet. The one you stationed just outside the Sol system. It seems they've been having some communication difficulties for the past hour. The chamber erupted into chaos. General Zax Prime was screaming about impossible technology. The Hrixi delegate's thorax had completely seized up. Supreme Councilor Vex Tara's avatar was trying to materialize in 16 places at once. And there I sat, watching Torres walk out as calmly as he'd entered, remembering something else I'd read about human history, something about the dangers of cornering a species that had perfected the art of appearing harmless. The Federation had forgotten the most important rule of the galaxy: those who seek to display their power rarely possess as much as they claim, and those who hide their strength rarely show even half of what they have. The humans hadn't just been patient. They had been practicing. The attack on New Eden wasn't just a massacre. It was a miscalculation of truly galactic proportions. 3 million dead. Captain Maya Rodriguez's voice cut through the council chamber like a phased blade. No holograms this time. She stood there in person, her simple black uniform a stark contrast to the ornate chamber. 3 million civilians. On an agricultural colony. I watched the council members squirm. It's remarkable how uncomfortable superior beings become when faced with someone who has absolutely nothing left to lose. Most unfortunate Supreme Councilor Vex Tara managed, their avatar flickering between shades of diplomatic concern and genuine fear. Rest assured, once our investigation, Rodriguez laughed. Actually laughed. Not the pleasant, dangerous chuckle of Chen or Torres. This was something else. Something that made my warning patterns flash so bright they nearly burned out. Oh, we're well past investigations. Counselor, she pulled out one of their primitive tablets. Would you like to know what we found in the debris field? Parts. Specifically, parts from ships registered to General Zax Prime's personal fleet. The crystalline general's form vibrated with rage. How dare you? My fleet has been cloaked in orbit around New Eden for the past week. Rodriguez finished for him. Yes, we know. We've known since they arrived. Just like we know about the other fleets positioned around all our major colonies. Did you really think we wouldn't notice? Impossible. Zax Prime shattered 3 of his minor facets in agitation. Our quantum cloaking technology is pathetically easy to detect if you know where to look. Rodriguez cut in. And we've had a lot of practice looking. 300 years of practice to be exact. She tapped her tablet again. Suddenly, every quantum display in the chamber lit up with sensor readings. Hundreds of them. Thousands. All showing Federation military movements near human space. We tracked every ship. Rodriguez continued, her voice deadly calm. Every communication. Every quantum signature. We watched you plan this genocide for years. We gave you every chance to stop. And you just couldn't help yourselves, could you? Now see here, Vex Tara's avatar tried to regain control. These accusations are... Admiral Chen sends her regards, by the way. Rodriguez interrupted, checking her tablet one last time. She wanted to be here for this, but she's a bit busy at the moment. Something about executing Operation Midnight Sun. The chamber's displays flickered again. New data appeared. Current data. live feeds from across Federation space. The Council watched in horror as their mighty Seventh Fleet, the one stationed near Sol, blinked out of existence. Not destroyed, just gone, along with the quantum signatures of 300 other Federation capital ships. What? What did you do? Vex Tara's avatar was strobing in panic now. Us? Nothing yet. Rodriguez smiled that terrible human smile. We just turned off your quantum cores, all of them. Simultaneously. Don't worry, life support's still running. We're not monsters after all, unlike some species I could name. General Zax Prime's crystalline form was vibrating so fast he was starting to sublime it. This is an act of war. No, General Rodriguez's smile vanished. This is a courtesy call. The war began 3 hours ago when you murdered 3 million of our people. This, she gestured at the displays showing helpless Federation ships. This is just us finally dropping the act. She turned to leave, then paused just as Torres had. These humans and their theatrical exits were becoming a pattern. You know what the funny thing is? She didn't turn around. We actually were behind you in quantum technology. 300 years ago. But then we figured out something far more important than fancy propulsion systems and communication networks. And what Vex Tara asked, their avatar barely holding form, was that. We learned how to shut them down. Rodriguez walked toward the door. You have 1 hour to surrender and hand over everyone involved in the attacks. After that, well, let's just say we've got 300 years of technological advancement to demonstrate. And after New Eden, we're done being patient. The door hissed shut behind her. For a moment there was absolute silence in the chamber. Then every quantum device from the highest military grade to the PX Lari delegates' game console went dark. The mighty Federation masters of quantum technology were suddenly running on backup chemical power cells, just like humans had been pretending to do for 3 centuries. I looked around the chamber at my fellow council members, their faces illuminated only by emergency lighting, and realized something that should have been obvious from the start. We hadn't been dealing with a primitive species. We'd been dealing with a species that had mastered the art of looking primitive. And we had just given them a reason to stop pretending. They called it the Ghost Fleet. We never saw it coming. Though, in retrospect, perhaps we should have asked ourselves why a species would stick with primitive fusion drives that could mysteriously evade our best detection systems. Status report Supreme Counselor Vex Tara demanded, their avatar barely maintaining coherence in the emergency command center. Someone tell me how. How did they? 57 minutes since their ultimatum began, I announced, watching my warning pattern strobe uselessly in the dim light. No response from any quantum-powered vessel in Federation space. 342 capital ships effectively neutralized. I hesitated. Some things are hard to say, even for a diplomat. And General Zax Prime's crystalline form had developed several stress fractures. And we've lost contact with the Zenith defense platform. I let that sink in. The Zenith platform, the Federation's ultimate weapon, capable of reducing planets to their constituent atoms, was supposed to be impossible to approach, let alone disable. Lost contact. Vex Tara's avatar flickered violently. How do you lose contact with the most heavily defended structure in known space? A new voice answered, one that sent shivers through my sensor membranes. Pretty easily, actually, once you know the back door. Admiral Sarah Chen's hologram appeared in the center of the room. Not through our systems, they were still dark, but from some human device that had apparently been sitting in our command center for who knows how long. You, General Zax Prime, tried to attack the hologram, passing right through it and cracking another facet. What have you done? Done? Oh, nothing much. Chen examined her nails casually, just demonstrated why patience shouldn't be mistaken for weakness. By the way, you really should update the security protocols on your quantum networks. They haven't changed since we first cracked them. Oh, about 290 years ago. The room went silent. Even the emergency lights seemed to dim in shock. That's impossible, Vex Tara whispered. You didn't even have quantum technology then? No, we just let you think we didn't. Chen smiled that terrible human smile again. Did you never wonder why we kept using primitive technology that could somehow slip past your most advanced sensors? Did you think we just got lucky? For 3 centuries. She shook her head, almost pityingly. While you were laughing at our fusion drives, We were building ships that could shut down your quantum cores from half a galaxy away. While you mocked our radio waves, we were mapping every weakness in your supposedly impenetrable defenses. And while you were planning to exterminate us. The hologram expanded, showing tactical displays of Federation space. Red dots began appearing everywhere. Hundreds of them, thousands. We were positioning our ghost fleet, Chen continued. 30,000 ships hidden in plain sight, watching, waiting, recording every atrocity you committed against our people while we tried to solve this peacefully. 30,000 General Zax Prime's crystal structure began to resonate with fear. But your navy only has 500 vessels. No, General. We only let you see 500 vessels. Chen checked her watch. You have 12 minutes left, by the way. I suggest you use them wisely. Or what Vex Tara tried to sound defiant, but their avatar was barely holding together. You'll destroy our ships? Murder our people like we? They stopped, suddenly realizing what they'd admitted. Like you murdered ours, Chen's voice turned arctic. No, we're not you. Every Federation ship we disabled? Their crews are fine, scared, probably confused, but unharmed. We even left their life support running on backup power. Because that's the difference between us, Counselor. You see, humans don't actually want to rule the galaxy. Our hologram started to fade. We just want to be left alone. But since you couldn't manage that, well, let's just say the next 12 minutes are your last chance to surrender before we show you exactly what 3 centuries of hidden technological advancement looks like. The hologram vanished, leaving us in the dim emergency lighting. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then our tactical displays, the backup, non-quantum ones, lit up with new signatures. The ghost fleet was decloaking. 30,000 ships, appearing from nowhere, their designs unlike anything we'd ever seen. And at that moment, looking at those ships that had hidden among us for centuries, I finally understood what humans meant when they talked about the calm before the storm. We hadn't just awakened a sleeping giant. We'd given it a reason to stop sleeping. They called it the 7-hour war. Though, to be perfectly honest, calling it a war was rather generous. I prefer to think of it as an extremely well-orchestrated demonstration of why you shouldn't push a species that spent 3 centuries preparing for exactly this scenario. The first hour was, perhaps, the most shocking. The Federation's mighty quantum communication network, the backbone of our civilization, simply turned off. Not damaged, not destroyed, just deactivated, as if someone had found the master power switch we didn't even know existed. This is impossible. General Zax Prime's crystalline form was developing more cracks by the minute. Our quantum protocols were written by beings who never imagined someone could turn quantum energy itself into a weapon. I observed, watching the tactical displays with a sort of horrified fascination. The second hour brought an even more terrifying revelation. The Ghost Fleet wasn't just shutting down our quantum cores, they were reprogramming them. Every disabled Federation vessel suddenly found its quantum drives reactivating, under human control. By the void, Vex Tara whispered, their avatar barely maintaining coherence. They're not just neutralizing our ships, they're taking them. The third hour demonstrated exactly why humans had kept their fusion drives. Turned out, when you didn't need to power quantum cores, you could use that energy for something else. Something like, say, weapons that could punch through quantum shields as if they were made of vapor. The fourth hour was when the Zenith defense platform reappeared. Not where it had been, mind you. The humans had somehow moved it, the most heavily defended structure in known space, to orbit their own homeworld, just to make a point. How General Zax Prime had given up trying to maintain his dignified crystalline structure. How long could they do this? Oh, probably since they first encountered us, I mused, my warning patterns having long since burned out. They just chose not to. Interesting strategy, don't you think? Letting your enemy believe they're superior while you quietly prepare for the day they prove themselves unworthy of that power. The fifth hour was when Admiral Chen's hologram reappeared in every Federation system simultaneously. Her message was admirably succinct: surrender now, or we'll demonstrate what else we've been working on for the past 3 centuries. The sixth hour was when the Federation Council, in its infinite wisdom, decided to call her bluff. The seventh hour was when we learned that humans had apparently spent quite a bit of time figuring out how to turn entire solar systems into temporary quantum dead zones. Not permanently, mind you, they weren't monsters, just long enough to make their point. "Attention Federation leadership," Chen's voice echoed through our backup speakers as our last defensive line went dark. "We have now demonstrated control over your quantum cores, your defense platforms, your communication networks, and your fundamental understanding of physics. Would anyone like to see what else is on the list?" The surrender took approximately 12 seconds to draft and transmit, via radio waves, ironically enough. As I watched the Federation's mighty fleets being systematically reprogrammed by technology we'd spent centuries mocking, I couldn't help but appreciate the sheer artistry of it all. The humans hadn't just outplayed us, they'd spent 300 years setting up the board while convincing us we were the only ones who knew the rules. Ambassador Krell Thor Chen's hologram appeared beside me, somehow maintaining perfect clarity despite our quantum dampeners. "Your warning patterns. We saw them. Every time. Thank you for trying." I managed what I hope was a dignified nod. "You could have stopped this at any time, couldn't you? All those raids, those attacks." "We needed to know who was involved," she said simply. "Every ship, every commander, every council member who voted to exterminate us. Hard to gather that kind of intelligence when your enemy is actively hiding their activities. Unless I realized, they think you're too primitive to be a threat." Her smile returned, smaller this time, almost sympathetic. "Exactly. Sometimes the best way to get someone to reveal their true nature is to let them think they have nothing to fear from you." As she vanished, I looked out at the ghost fleet, 30,000 ships that had hidden among us for centuries, watching, waiting, and preparing for exactly this moment. And I finally understood why humans found it so amusing when we called them primitive. They had mastered the most advanced technology of all, the power of being underestimated. They say history is written by the victors. But in this case, history was written by a species that had mastered the art of making others write exactly what they wanted all while thinking it was their own idea. The Great Reorganization, they called it. Not an empire, not a conquest, not even a regime change. Just a reorganization trust humans to make galactic domination sound like a routine office reshuffling. "The Federation will maintain its autonomy," Admiral Chen announced to the new council, where humans now held permanent seats. "With some minor adjustments to the power structure." Minor adjustments. Like the quantum dampeners installed in every council chamber, or the human technical advisors now stationed on every major Federation world, or the fact that our mighty military now ran on human-approved protocols. The most elegant part, they didn't even have to enforce most of their new rules. The mere knowledge that they could shut down our quantum technology at any moment was enough to ensure compliance. As Supreme Counselor Vextara, now just Counselor Vextara, often remarked, "It's hard to plot rebellion when your enemy can turn your civilization off like a light switch." But perhaps the most incredible thing wasn't the technology, or the strategy, or even the patience. It was how they handled their victory. No purges, no revenge killings. Even the architects of the New Eden massacre received fair trials broadcast on those primitive radio waves they'd insisted on keeping. Justice, Captain Rodriguez explained during one of the proceedings, doesn't require cruelty. Something your Federation never quite understood. And so here we are, one standard year after the 7-hour war, watching humans guide the galaxy with the same quiet efficiency they used to deceive it. They even let us keep our quantum technology after they finished updating it, of course. The PX Lari delegate still plays their games during council sessions, though now they're careful to look up when humans are speaking. General Zax Prime's replacement, his crystal structure finally shattered from stress, maintains a respectfully attentive posture whenever Admiral Chen visits. And me? I've kept my position as ambassador, though now with a rather ironic addition to my title, Special Advisor on Interspecies Patience. The humans, it seems, have a sense of humor. As I prepare to end this official record of the events that reshaped our galaxy, I find myself returning to that first council meeting, when we laughed at their fusion drives and radio waves, when we thought we were the masters of technology, the pinnacle of civilization. We forgot the most fundamental rule of the universe: true power isn't about having the most advanced technology. It's about knowing when not to show it. And no species will ever forget the moment when humanity finally decided to show theirs.